Joe. Anyway, good morning. I'm Jim Dotson. We are fortunate to have with us today Senator Sullivan. Senator is with us all from wherever. Who knows where he's been? He's probably been everywhere. But Senator, thank you for being with us today. Thank you for what you're doing for Alaska, and the floor is yours.
Great. Thanks, Jim. Joma, thank you. And everybody, good to see you guys. It was just, I think it was February I was here, in a good meeting, physical meeting, but giving an update. But want to just provide an update and take your questions and comments and suggestions on what's happening in D.C. Some of the things are, we're still obviously struggling with the pandemic in our state and nationally, but I do want to update you on some things that I think are going well, and maybe you don't always read about them in the press, although there's a good story in the Newsminer this morning on one of the energy issues that we're working on. And then get your questions and your comments and suggestions, because we're still in session, and we'll be in session here pretty much through August, with the exception of a week off for the 4th of July. But I'll start out by saying I'm in, I obviously get up to Fairbanks quite a lot, given my father-in-law and, strong connections to the community with my wife. But the main reason I'm here, as you might know, is finally the celebration of life and burial of a great Fairbanksan, my mother-in-law. So you might know Mary Jane passed away 2 months ago, and given the pandemic, it's not easy to have funerals and everything, but we're going to do that in a socially distancing, appropriate way. We're of course welcoming all folks for there'll be a visitation at noon tomorrow at Sacred Heart, and a funeral at 10, and then potlatch out at Doyon in the afternoon. So she's quite a trailblazer, and cared deeply about the interior, and I think not just a great Alaskan, a great American. But but the other thing, Senator Murkowski and I, we've been doing a lot of these teletown halls, kind of every week. I did. Our schedules didn't sync up because I was coming home early and got in yesterday afternoon. So I did one Wednesday night, and mentioned this saying that I heard from a really good friend of mine. Some of you might know Boyuk Ryan, who's owner and top guy at Ryanair, great leader in the state. But he said, and I've been using this now, I'm stealing it from him: tough times don't last, tough people do. And if there was ever a part of Alaska or America that epitomizes that, I think it's the interior. And so what I like to say is, we'll get through this pandemic, battling it on many fronts right now. So I want to give you a quick update on that, dig a little bit deep on the NDAA, that's the National Defense Authorization Act, that passed out of committee. I'm on that committee, as you know, Armed Services Committee. It's a really good one, and it's going to be a huge one for the interior. And then take your questions. So, as I mentioned, we're battling this on many fronts. The one issue that I've been very focused on in, being home, being here in Fairbanks, seeing kind of the lack of tourists, right? It's a challenge, there's no doubt about it. But we've been working hard, particularly on the PPP program. We will be, again, trying to look at this. That program ends at the end of this month. Still $100 billion plus in that. I've worked that very hard at the highest levels of the federal government, literally the president, the Secretary of the Treasury, who I text like daily, he's probably sick of me, but hey, that's my job, to make sure that that program could help address Alaskan businesses, seasonal businesses in particular. So we were able to get the regulations on that changed to enable seasonal businesses to use the amount of workers they had last summer, not just March and April. That gives you a much higher PPP loan. And we got that done about 6 weeks ago, which was probably a big priority for a lot of our small businesses. And then just 2 weeks ago, another huge priority that I was hearing, I actually ran into some folks at the airport when I came in yesterday and said this was their number one priority. We fixed it to enable the forgiveness period to go from 8 weeks to 6 months. So that's a big deal. And the loan term to go from 2 years to 5 years, and the provision that focuses on how much of that forgiveness money has to go to your payroll from 75% to 60%. So we think that that was important. We're working on a fix literally as we speak. This is not as much of an interior issue, but the fishermen, commercial fishermen in particular, of our great state, of which there's thousands, tens of thousands, they have not been able to utilize this in a way that's been helpful. We're on the verge of fixing that. I've been pounding the Treasury Department for about 2 months on that one, but we're close. And we have had, an uptick, an important, if you remember, the EIDL loans from SBA, let's just face it, initially were a disaster. And now we're getting to the point where they're implementing those. And, in terms of PPP, as of June 14th, 10,400 loans to small businesses in Alaska at about almost close to 1.3 billion. EIDL, which initially was a disaster as of June 12th, 3,900 loans to Alaskan small businesses at over $250 million, and 7,900 advances. So we're getting there. Again, not perfect. If you have issues, Greg Bringhurst is here. My team has been with Senator Murkowski and Congressman Young working around the clock on trying to make sure if you have a problem, literally, my casework team is doing, I'll compliment Greg and the team there. It's not a 9-to-5 job during the pandemic. It's 24/7. What I've been telling everybody, look, we got to be so responsive more than ever, because you don't know if it's that last minute where someone who's built a small business for 20 years is on the verge, right? So let my team know. I've literally taken up individual issues all the way to secretaries of the Treasury Department to fix them. And so can't guarantee we'll fix it, but I can guarantee my team will work its tail off to address it. I see.
Sir?
Yeah.
Regarding the PPP, you mentioned about $100 billion
Left.
Yeah. Authorized but not spent.
Yeah.
Appropriated, but
So
not.
money's sitting there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Are they planning to plus that up, or we're gonna extend the eligibility deadline?
It's a great issue, Jomo. Right now, we don't know, but I can't imagine we're to let $130 billion just expire.
End of this month right now.
End of this month. But I'm telling people, small businesses, get the word out, because again, remember, if you get a loan and you use it according to the qualified expenses, that's now 60% labor, payroll, 40% other qualified expenses, mortgage, interest, healthcare, and you use the loan for that for a 6-month period,
Got it.
that whole thing becomes a grant, right? So that I would just strongly encourage people to use it if you. I see Jeff Cook on the line here. I will tell you that Lisa Murkowski and I have been pounding. We're not there yet, but Jeff, I want to tell you, and I was on the phone again with my team this morning, on more federal dollars for the hospital here. I mean,
Senator, thank you. You know, we testified before the borough last night. The borough mayor and this, in particular, has not been overly supported. We're hoping we might have changed some minds last night, but you know, we have 35 million in losses. We're still not done with this. We've had a resurgence of cases, as you know, and so we've got 7.5 from the state and only 5.6 from the feds. Yes, and they classified us, as you well know, as more of a metropolitan hospital instead of a single source rural hospital. Our other big challenge, Senator, I don't know if you can help us, it's a continuing one, and that is reagent to finish testing. We had one of our employees or our own employees test positive, and I know Jim Dotson has had a granddaughter that they were waiting for a test, but it took 7 days to get the test back because we don't have enough reagent to finish the tests. And in that time, you've really hurt your contact tracing. So don't know if you can do anything on that part of it, but boy, we're hurting on reagent, and it's really tough. And
yeah,
and
let me, Jeff. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, fine, go ahead.
No, you had one more point to make.
Oh, my only other point was, Senator, I know that you and I both respect our elders very much. And today I want to in particular respect my elder, Jim Dotson. I believe it's his birthday today. And he's
I didn't even know. I love it. Well, happy birthday, Jim. How about a round of applause, a Zoom round of applause for Jim?
I'd just like to point out he's 5 months and 6 days older than me.
And what is it? Are you 50 this year, or what's your
52.
52. Well, look, we are. And I'm frustrated. You know, one of my. I think you guys know me well enough. My team and I, we put our shoulder into something relentlessly. Usually, we get the result we want. And on the hospital, it hasn't happened. I have pounded. I mean, I don't yell at people, but I get very angry. And the HHS secretary, the deputy secretary, I was on the phone already this morning again on this issue because I heard about the borough assembly meeting last night. So we are not done yet. And they know all about this hospital. They know all about it. So we're going to keep working that. Again, can't promise a result, but I am getting increasingly pissed off at the most senior level folks because you're exactly right. The Fairbanks Memorial Hospital has kind of fallen into this hard to describe entity that doesn't fit with the formulas that they're putting out for the rest of the country. And we're just trying to devise a formula that will enable it to fit. And we have some ideas. I know you're aware of them, but we'll keep working it. So,
Senator,
Thank
one of the things, Jeff mentioned this, so my granddaughter got sick last week. She had a test last Thursday. Now it's a week and 1 day later, and there's no results.
Yeah, let me.
That's crazy.
So part of this is Fed, but a lot of this is, it's state. Now I'm working closely with the governor and Dr. Zink, and well, here's what I can do. Greg, just have me call them after.
Okay.
Because our numbers, believe it or not, our state of Alaska numbers at the per capita level are some of the best in the country in terms of testing. But if it takes forever, it's not
useless.
It's not worth it, right? So can you remind me to get on that just today and talk to Sarah on my team about that? You might want to just text her now.
I'll text her right now.
So anyways, let me continue on a couple other issues, and I'd love to open it up. On the energy sector, and again, I can go into a lot of the details, but I've been leading a whole group of U.S. senators. Lisa's part of it, where we have, and working closely, literally, with the president and his team. If you look where we were 2 months ago, it was pretty darn scary, right? Negative oil prices, I don't even know what that means. Like you're paying people to buy your oil or not buy your oil. But it was the combination of course, the demand destruction that happened with the economic collapse of the U.S. economy, but the global economy, the Saudi-Russian price war that the Crown Prince decided to have a price war right when we went into this pandemic. And I'll just be a little bit more political here, the extreme left of the political apparatus in America pressuring banks not to invest in the energy sector, which is outrageous, outrageous. So we've been fighting that on many fronts. I led a group of 13 senators writing the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia and then having conference calls and meetings with them, including the Energy Minister, Abdulaziz, and the message was very clear. We are some of your strongest supporters. The U.S.-Saudi strategic relationship's been important to both countries for 70 years. You are now taking actions that are directly hurting, you know, the great Americans and workers and working families who are in this industry, and stand by, right? We're not going to take it. And I had legislation to remove all our military forces from Saudi Arabia. I literally told all of these senior Saudi officials, next time one of your neighbors like Iran decides to invade you, don't look for the 1st Marine Division or the 82nd Airborne to come bail you out. And it got their attention. I know that because our ambassador there, General Abizaid, who was a former CENTCOM commander, some of you might remember, I worked for him as a Marine for a year and a half out in the area, so I know him very well. Matter of fact, I was the guy who worked to get him confirmed. But the Saudis have now committed, they were at 12.3 million barrels a day, which is an unbelievable number in March, and now they've committed, and I think they're cutting back to 7.5 million barrels a day. That'll be their lowest production rate in 20 years, almost 20 years. That's helped stabilize the price a little bit. We're almost in the 40s, which isn't great, but it's a lot better than negative. So we're going to continue work on that, and then we are really taking it to the banks. There was a article in the Newsminer today that highlighted the letter that I led with the delegation to the bank regulators saying, hey, this is outrageous. You know, the big banks who get FDIC insurance, who got bailed out last time, are they really allowed to just discriminate against an entire sector of the U.S. economy, particularly Alaska, when they say Arctic investments? We think the answer is no, and you need to get on them. I think they're violating federal laws. So we're punching back. And all these CEOs have been doing right now is cave into the real radical, you know, you have that Congresswoman AOC who doesn't know much about anything, but, you know, the fact that she's tweeting when the oil prices are collapsing, celebrating the loss of tens of thousands of jobs, it's horrible, right? So we're in there. I think we're going to have a good, we're getting there, a lot better than it was 2 months ago. And then finally, I'll just mention, and I do think this is important news. So the NDAA this past year, or just 2 weeks ago, or just last week, voted out a committee. You know, I chair the Readiness Subcommittee. This NDAA this year, I think, really solidifies Alaska as the preeminent strategic location, certainly for Arctic operations, but really Asia-Pacific operations. Just to give you some of the highlights, it authorizes an additional $200 million, it's 196, in military construction. It's almost all right here. That's on top of the $1.4 billion that we've already secured. So that'll bring us to about $1.6 billion. And it's all interior, almost all interior Alaska.
$96 million.
It focuses, and I have some of the press if you're interested. That $200 million doesn't include an additional, essentially $50 million for Arctic communications, low Earth orbit. This was the NORTHCOM's #1 unfunded priority of they wanted about $150 million. We got a third of that in there. this is huge because it's gonna really close a gap that they see in terms of hypersonic missiles coming in to the country through the Arctic, but it enables us, we will be able to utilize that in a commercial way with these military low Earth orbit satellites to help with our own internet connections. This could be game changer for our state. And we got a third of that authorized. It importantly has what we've called authorizes a Arctic security studies, a DoD security studies. The Department of Defense has these security studies centers all around the world in key places. The one place they don't have one is an Arctic one. It was Lisa and I had this legislation. I got it in the bill. Would be a two-step process called the Ted Stevens Center for Arctic Security Studies. You know, I don't want to jinx it, but you know, certainly could end up at UAF in my view, and would cement us from the world's perspective as the place. This happened just the same week that you may have seen the president put out a memo on Arctic strategy, and all this stuff about icebreakers, basing icebreakers in certain areas. Of course, I think it should be Alaska. And we will have we're requesting a follow-up from the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of the Navy. I had a good discussion with the National Security Advisor just 2 days ago on filling out this strategy. So, and then finally, as it typically does, two other things. It lays out what the Congress of the United States thinks should be the qualifications for the Air Force to make its decision on where to place the OCONUS, what we call OCONUS, outside continental United States. That includes Alaska. Basing of the KC-46. Doesn't say Alaska, but if you read the qualifications that the Congress is laying out, you might think it looks like Alaska because I wrote it. And it's right now it's kind of down to Alaska and Guam. And that decision should be coming out relatively soon. It mandates a interim capability requirement at Fort Greely. You may have heard the Undersecretary of Defense in terms of technology, very smart guy, but as I've been saying, some of these Pentagon guys, smart guys making dumb decisions. We got a huge amount of work done with my missile defense, Advancing America's Missile Defense Act in 2017. That's what authorized that new $200 million field at Fort Greely that's pretty much been built. But then the Undersecretary says, well, the technology isn't perfected. We need new technology. So right now their plan is to have that field empty for over 10 years. So it's built, but no missiles in it. And I'm saying, come on, guys, that's really not very smart and not strategic. So we have a solution to that. And then finally, one that I've been working on, I think it shows you the silver lining, if there is one, and I do think there is, on the pandemic. One of the things that we're looking at really hard is making sure the supply chains that have made us vulnerable, particularly to China, that they're going to be reworked and that we're going to bring manufacturing and supplying things like pharmaceuticals and PPE back to our own country, right? We should not be reliant on the Chinese, who are a growing adversary of ours, for pharmaceuticals. But I'll tell you this one thing, I put forward my strategic critical minerals bill that Senator Murkowski and I have been working on for a long time. Last year, I tried to get this bill attached to the NDAA. At the last minute, again, I'll just give you the straight up, Chuck Schumer canned it, primarily because the extreme radical environmental groups don't want to mine in America. They'd rather have the Chinese mine something, even though they trash their environment. I put it in again this year. We had a big debate in the conference. This would make us, with the goal of trying to be strategic critical mineral independent with the ability to have stockpiles from China within 10 years. The minority in the Armed Services Committee opposed it, so I brought it up for a vote in the committee after I argued why we needed, particularly after the pandemic. 20-4. 20-4. So it's breaking through. This will be great for America. This will be huge for Alaska and our mining sector. I mean, if we do it in an environmentally responsible way, and we have these strategic critical minerals that, by the way, go into F-35s and so much of our defense industrial base, why should we be reliant on China when we are right now? So that's in there as well. So those are kind of the key elements of the NDAA that I wanted you to be aware of, because I think it's really cementing our state as a critical area, and there's increasingly bipartisan recognition that that's important, not just for our state and our economy and our jobs, but important for the national security of America. And so there's good news out there. You don't always hear about it, but this NDAA in particular is going to be one that I think we're going to remember for a long time. So we're going to probably bring it to the floor in 2 weeks of the Senate. This stuff that's in there is baked. It will pass. And then we got to try to get this through the House, which could be a little bit more challenging. Conference, that's always the big challenge. That's where they go to try to strip out some of these provisions. So it's not a done deal on everything I just described, but I think it's pretty darn strong for us and the Interior in particular. So that's my update, and would look forward to any questions or comments or suggestions or anything else you guys want to talk about or focus on.
Okay, everybody, I am monitoring the screen. If you just want to raise your hand, we'll unmute and go. Rep. LeBon.
Yes,
All right,
thank you,
Bart.
Tromo. And thank you, Senator. Yes, good morning. Thank you, Senator, for your presentation. And I have first a comment, and that is to give a shout out to Greg Brinkhurst for the excellent job he does representing your office here in the Interior. I see him often, and he's a great resource for your office here in Fairbanks, and I'd just like to publicly make that statement. The second comment I have is I'm going to go back to the banks, and I appreciate the letter in today's News Miner, or the article. And one of those mega banks has extensive business interest in Alaska. I think we all know who I'm talking about. And one piece of this that gets overlooked is something called the Community Reinvestment Act. That bank has obligations, and maybe not to the majors that initiate development, but to their vendors and subcontractors that typically are Alaska-owned businesses that have extensive relationships and business interests on the North Slope. You cannot collect deposits from Alaska businesses and Alaskans and then refuse to reinvest those dollars into important industries that are critical to the very sustainability of the economy in which you're doing business. You can't have it both ways. And that bank needs to be called out. I made a statement on the Alaska House floor about this when the news broke that this bank was backing off on any investment on the North Slope. And it was very disappointing news, so I'm glad to see that you haven't let this one go. Thank you for that comment.
Well, Bart, let me thank you, and thank you for all the great work you're doing. I'm keeping a close eye on our legislature, and as we say in the Marine Corps, one team, one fight as we get through this, right? And that's the way I view this. Doesn't matter what party you are in, or we got to get through this together. And on a lot of the issues that I just raised here, I think extend way beyond party. They're Alaskan issues. They're not Democrat or Republican issues. I would agree 100% with your comment on Greg and my whole team. I'm very proud of my team. They've been working, like I said, I did one of these teletown halls on Wednesday night. We get thousands of people that call into these every week. And a lot of them are ideas, and I've brought those ideas to the front of the, federal government. But a lot of them are just people who are struggling, and they can't seem to get help, and they can't seem to get the SBA to answer their phone. So, I mean, part of my job, a huge part of my job is then to turn to casework and say, all right, call my office, give them the info. He goes, I said, I'll call the SBA, right? They're going to take my phone call, right? And so my team has been working round the clock on that, and I do want to compliment Greg and the whole team. It's thank you for doing that, though, because sometimes it can be overlooked, but I guarantee you, they're not working 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, right? They're 24/7. Look, on the bank issue, you may have seen, so this came up, I was in a meeting, now about 2 months ago with the president and a couple other senators, and he invited some of the top energy execs in the country to this meeting. And I worked hard to get a particular Alaska company in that meeting, just because I wanted the president and his whole team to hear about what's going on in our state. And this issue came up. And since that time, because I think part of it is these CEOs, they've just been getting pressure from one kind of side of the political spectrum. You know, the CEOs go to the House Financial Services Committee, and they have these, let's call it what it is, these very extreme anti-energy members of Congress, just beat the heck out of them. When are you gonna divest of all dirty fossil fuels, right? And they feel the pressure, and they haven't felt any pressure from people like us. Say, wait a minute, we have the highest environmental standards in the world. These are great jobs. These are great Americans working in this sector, and this is a really important sector of the economy. By the way, this is the sector of the economy that brought us out of our last recession, the 2008-2009 Great Recession. In 2010, 2011, when we were getting out of it, the numbers are close to 50% of America's GDP recovery was driven by the energy sector. I mean, huge. So I led this letter of 36 senators and congressmen, is a really good group, to the president saying, Mr. President, you and your team need to work this. I've raised it with him a number of times, including in a press conference I was in with him when he signed the PPP Replenishment Act, and I was in the Oval Office, and he got asked a question about energy, and you don't normally do this with the President of the United States in the Oval Office, but I said, excuse me, sir, can I say a word about this too? And I did, and I said, it's just not right. And to your point, Bart, the Community Reinvestment Act, I think you're exactly right. As a matter of fact, I cite it in that letter that's highlighted in the Newsminer today. And one final thing, I've been making calls to these CEOs, right? And I've been calling them, saying, hey guys, like maybe you don't have a very good general counsel on your team, but you gotta look hard at federal law, because I think you're bumping up against it or maybe even violating it. And, last time I checked, you're not allowed to discriminate against an entire sector of the U.S. economy when it's legal and creditworthy. And by the way, you get a ton of help from the federal government. Last time I checked, some of your banks got bailed out in 08 and 09. It wouldn't even be in existence if it weren't for the federal government. You get FDIC insurance. So the good news is I had a phone call with with the CEO of a very big bank that does a ton of work here. And I won't name the name, but it has the name America in it. And he told me he was not going to follow suit with these other banks. So, I think our kind of counter pressure is starting to work. And I just think it's, as I've told my Senate colleagues, I said, hey, even if you don't have an energy sector, this is coming to a theater near you. The next time a sector of the economy falls out of disfavor with some of the hardcore left of America, they're going to do it to you. When are they going to do it to the farmers? They're already doing it to people who manufacture firearms. And so I just think that it's a really important issue. I think we're on the right side of it, and we're finally applying pressure to these senior execs, saying, don't look at this as an easy decision. If you think just because AOC is beating you up in a hearing that you should just cave to her radical view, stand by, right? Because there are others who think that what you're doing is not only problematic for your duties to our economy, not just in Alaska, but America, but it might be illegal. So we're just getting going on this, and they're starting to pay attention.
Thank you, Mr. Senator. Jean has been waiting to ask a question. Your go, Jean.
I think he's muted.
Gene Terrio.
Ms. Terrio? Muted.
Oh, I see.
He might be muted on his side.
Hey, Gene, I think you might be muted on your end, buddy.
Might not be there.
Okay, well, why don't you hold on? We have Miss Marianne Nichols. Miss Nichols?
Yes, I'm here, and I just turned myself on. I've written to, Senator Sullivan, I wrote to you in early May about the investment companies and banks wanting to divest in the Arctic, and I have the article that BlackRock investment company or asset company was the first place I heard about this, and I don't know how discrimination got into the conversation, but Lawrence Fink is the chief executive of BlackRock, and he announced this because they were going to avoid investments in companies that, quote, present a high sustainable related risk. And this is all to do with climate change and the fact that we have to move over, albeit slowly, to renewable energy. He also says that his intent is to encourage every company, not just energy firms, to rethink their carbon footprints. I could read a whole lot of other quotes, but that's mostly what I wanted to say. I wrote in early May, as I say, to Senator Sullivan about this.
Okay. Did we respond yet, Marianne?
Nope.
Okay. And do you agree with Larry Fink?
Definitely. I think climate change, other than the current pandemic, is the most important threat that we have to humanity.
So one issue, I'll just respond, and one issue that there's a lot of issues with regard to Larry Fink, and there's a whole other issue of why federal laws provide someone who manages that kind of money so much power. That's a whole nother issue that we're looking into, and I think that the issue of the way in which he is going about this, saying that we're going to do it like a cliff, where all of a sudden we're going to not invest in any of these companies at all. I just think maybe you and I can respectfully disagree. I just think that, A, it's not even workable. I mean, we all agree that I'm a huge all of the above energy guy, renewables, wind, solar, natural gas, oil, coal, all of the above. And his view is essentially we're going to stop investing today in the fossil fuel, and I don't think it's workable. There's no transition that you can do tomorrow. The transition, if you talk to people, is going to take decades to keep people employed, to keep our economy moving. And so I would just respectfully, I certainly disagree with him, and I'll be glad to look at your letter, but I think the idea that you can cut all investments off today and have a sustainable path would destroy the U.S. economy and all the jobs that we have, but it just doesn't work right now. So I disagree strongly with Larry Fink on this, and maybe it's just an area where you and I'm a full believer in protecting our environment. You know, I have probably the best record of any senator on protecting our oceans and cleaning up our oceans. It's a huge passion of mine. But, for example, he's even against natural gas. I mean, President Obama used to highlight that greenhouse gas emissions declined during his 8 years. That's true. But what he never said was the next sentence, which is they declined because of the revolution in the production of natural gas, which his administration tried to kill. So even on issues of natural gas, I think Larry Fink is fully against investing there. And I just think that is, many people view that as a transitionary fuel that's critical. It's certainly going to be critical to our state and the interior. So, but I look forward to responding more formally to your letter.
Certainly. I just followed up with the team about our letter.
Okay.
Certainly what we have found out here in the interior is we're trying to bring online things like wind and solar in particular. We have a technology gap to make it truly workable and affordable, and that's battery storage.
Right.
Because we were chasing the wind with high-cost diesel.
So we want to get back to the
Okay. But yes, let's get back to the questions. Thank you very much, Ms. Nichols. Again, Mr. Bringhurst will be following up. Representative Prox, you still there?
Yes, still there. Thank you, Jomo.
Sir.
Senator, we've been dealing with getting the CARES Act money out on the state level, and there has been some confusion and uncertainty about the requirements of the CARES Act money, and basically if businesses have received other assistance, they're not eligible for the CARES Act money. How is that being resolved?
So, Mike, let me answer your question in two ways. So, number one, the CARES Act, in my view, is being read at the federal government level too narrowly when it comes to what you and the governor, our legislators and the governor, can do with the money. So I have a bill called the CARES Act Flexibility Act. It's very bipartisan. And I had a meeting over at the White House a couple weeks ago with the president and his team to try and get them to support it. It hasn't passed yet. It's close. I'm hopeful to get it done in July. But what that would do, it would make it 100% clear that the money that was sent to the state, it's about $1.3 billion, and that was an area where Senator Murkowski and I, in the kind of rough and tumble of putting the CARES Act together, initially that provision for money for the states was just a pure per capita formula. And we were like, no, that's not going to work. And then they said, all right, we'll have a minimum for each state. And they came back and said $25 million for each state. And we were like, no, that's not going to work. So we got it up to $1.25 billion, minimum, every state. Some people were complaining that was too much for states like Alaska, and my view is my job is to protect my state and get resources to it during these challenging times. So that's what you guys were able to deal with. I think it's a little bit above 1.25 because you add the per capita. So the problem with the way in which Treasury has been interpreting that, they don't allow lost revenues for subcomponent political entities, say like the, North Star Borough or Fairbanks, or, the example I keep using in all my advocacy on this is the Denali Borough, where because of how dependent they are with regard to revenues based on tourism, particularly cruise ship tourism, their revenue base this year is going to be very challenged, let's put it that way. So my bill essentially says if it's related to the pandemic, then the state should be able to use this money pretty much however the heck they want, including replacing lost revenues for sub-components of the state's kind of political entities, boroughs, cities, municipalities. So I think we're close on that, and I know everybody wants that. I've talked to our Republican, Democrat, state reps like you, Mike. I've talked to all the state senators. I've talked to the governor, and I think almost all the governors want it, regardless of political party. And by the way, some people in DC have attacked my bill saying, oh, this is going to be more spending. This is the money that's already in the bank account of the state of Alaska. This money's sitting there. This isn't about anything new. It's about what went out in the CARES Act. So I'm hopeful to get that done. There's a lot of support. I just got a couple senators who have been, and they're friends of mine, have been blocking it. So that's number one. I think more directly to your question, though, and there's been some confusion, and I've triple checked this, the CARES Act money that's going to, say, PPP or the EIDL for small businesses has no restriction. And I asked Mnuchin as we were putting this legislation together, knowing that our state was likely to do its own programs. So if you're a small business and you got a PPP loan, there is nothing in the CARES Act that says you should be prohibited from getting money from the state's program. Nothing. So right now, that's what no offense to you and Bart and the governor, who, I work closely with, but that's the state of Alaska put that prohibition on the additional money going out to our businesses under a state program. That is not required by federal law. So you guys can change that. I've been hearing from a lot of Alaskans that they want that changed, but that is not something that the federal CARES Act strings, of which there are some, requires. If someone got a PPP loan and then they go to the state program, under federal law, that's fine. I think the limitation has been placed by the state legislature and the governor, and my understanding is you guys are working to fix that. Maybe you and Bart can let me know on that one. I actually heard it on the radio this morning, something that you're looking at fixing it.
Well, the legislators will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the thought process initially was to gap fill, to make sure on the front run of the distributions by the state that it would go to those folks who had not qualified for those federal programs, and then they'd come back later as they found that the money wasn't, or to help with further distributions.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Rep. LeBon, if you may.
Yes, quick update. House Finance heard from the administration and agencies, including ADA, regarding that issue, and there has been movement. The Department of Law has reviewed, as the senator mentioned, the federal statutes on the CARES Act, and there is flexibility. There's an effort to allow some of the small businesses that receive that economic disaster money, only $1,000, to also apply for CARES Act grant money through the state. In some cases, businesses have offered to return their federal money, which was just a drop in the bucket for what their need was, and then apply for state grant money, and that door is now open. Thank you.
Good. That's great.
It's not quite true. Anyway, you better get to Tracy.
Okay. All right, Ms. Tracy? Actually, Tracy, you're, oh, here we go. Try again.
Can you hear me?
Yes, miss.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you, Jomo. And thank you, Senator Sullivan. Just as a bit of introduction, I'm Fairbanksian, born and raised, proud business owner here, and condolences to your family, and wish you a great celebration of life and some good focused time with your family this weekend.
Thank you, Tracy.
Yeah, my second comment is I do appreciate the PPP and all your efforts for that. We are definitely leveraging that, and we work closely with our local bank, Denali State Bank, and really appreciate their assistance to keep 38 of our employees statewide working fully, and especially appreciate the extension. That helps us with a little bit of flexibility. We're also leveraging the Family Care Act, which has allowed our staff to, take care of their family as well. So appreciate both of those. So regarding the military NDAA spending, it's an important part of our business. We do a lot of work. We just finished the F-35 hangar out at Eielson and a munition facility. Local engineers, local general contractors, big backbone to our, community here and to our professional business as architects. So just curious, I appreciate the update on the spending. For some reason, it's been hard for us to get really accurate forecasts on the spending, and especially how it affects us here in Alaska. So I wasn't sure if there was additional specifics that your office could share, or I could contact you and Greg directly to ask so that we're best poised and prepared, because with healthcare challenges and university challenges, we're sort of having to be nimble as a business. So I would love to learn more specifics about that.
Well, I can give you just a little bit on the military construction side. It's $48 million for a Fort Greely Communications Center.
Okay.
It's $59 million for an unaccompanied enlisted personnel housing barracks at Fort Wainwright. It's $55 million for a Fort Wainwright Child Development Center, and it's I think it's $18.5 million for the Cobra Dane. That's our one of our satellites out on the Aleutian Island chain that is critical to our missile defense system out on Shimia. So those are and remember, those are authorized.
Mm-hmm.
They need to be appropriated, but this was the combination of me. This had a lot to do with, to be perfectly blunt, the challenges we've had at Fort Wainwright with the suicides. And I have been beating the drum at the highest levels, literally the Secretary of Defense, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. We were the office that pressed the Army to send that Epicon team to get up here and look like what is going on, right? I mean, as a Marine, I've had this issue in one of my units, which was horrendous, right? A young Marine, Alaskan Marine, who took his own life, but the rash that we had at Fort Wainwright was shocking.
Mm-hmm.
And so to the Army's credit, they got up here, they put together a plan. This is the beginning of the plan. There's more. But to their credit, they put their money where their mouth is, and we were working with them. These are things that they think for the longer term are going to help with it's a great base, great community, of course, here in Fairbanks and North Pole. But, you're a young enlisted guy and you're away from home, you're from Louisiana or something, and, it's winter. And so this is the Army's commitment, and there'll be more. I'm confident of that. So it has to get appropriated. I'm very confident it will be appropriated. The fact that it's authorized in a very bipartisan way in the NDAA is the initial start. And, these will be really good construction projects right here in the heart of Fairbanks and the interior and North Pole. And look, if we get to KC-46, and I don't want to jinx it, but that's 12 new big aircraft. And who knows what that will bring, but it'll bring a lot in terms of military construction.
Great.
And even
Thank
the
you.
Ted Stevens Center, right? I mean, we're pressing this on all fronts.
And Tracy, this is Greg Bringhurst here. I'll follow up with a couple documents that I have, and then also try to connect you with our defense team in DC that can give you a verbal update. So,
Great, I sure appreciate it.
absolutely.
Greg, if you would give those to Jim, we'll send them out to this group.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks, Ms. Tracy.
Great.
Okay, Gene Terrio.
Yes, I changed computers. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Senator, thanks for the time this morning. I know you've worked closely with Senator Murkowski on energy legislation. She had a bill that had provisions that dovetailed with proposed legislation in the state of Alaska to remove some roadblocks for energy, particularly looking at the strategic placement of Alaska and the need to power all of these facilities out on the coastline of Alaska long term. And so I'm wondering if you can shed some light on the possibility of her energy package passing this year, or components of it passing by being attached to other bills.
So Gene, good to hear your voice. So you're talking about her bill that was on the floor earlier in the year, like it was in February?
Yes, and then I believe it got pulled back, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, so she was leading, you know, obviously as chairman of the Energy and Natural Resources Committee, was leading on a big energy package, as you mentioned. I was a supporter of it. You know, every now and then the Senate works on the issue of kind of consent, and usually you have consent. If one senator though doesn't consent on an issue, you have the ability to kind of gum up everything. And this was an issue that was almost unrelated to her bill, but there was a battle about the amendment process during that legislation, and it essentially, after a week of trying to move it, we were a little bit in gridlock, and it didn't pass. It didn't move, which I know was a huge frustration to her, me as well. But so I don't know when that's going to come back up, just to be perfectly honest, because you know, one of the challenges in the Senate is the body that, you know, primarily works on consensus, primarily works at 60 vote thresholds. So you almost always need bipartisan legislation, and then the challenge is like time. There's only so much floor time because of the rules that often require 30 hours of debate on simple measures. So that's a long answer to your question, essentially saying I'm not sure when that's coming back on the floor. At least for this session of Congress, we may have missed the window.
Thank you.
All right, we are right at 9 a.m. Do you have time for?
Yeah, a couple more. I think we're gonna.
Our next is, he's on his way.
Okay.
Okay, we do, thank you, Senator Sullivan.
No, we got a couple more
For a couple more questions. Does anyone have any? If you just want to raise your hand, or actually you can go ahead and unmute. Mr.
Joe,
Oak?
this is Mike Kraft. I have a question.
Oh, Mr. Kraft, please, go ahead.
Good morning, Senator. Hi, good morning. I was just curious what you think about the SIP and the fact that the EPA rejected the state SIP. Where do you see that going from here?
Yeah. When did that happen?
They're in the comment period now, I believe, still.
Yeah, so Mike, as you know, I've been tracking that really, really closely. As a matter of fact, our last meeting here was February to do the follow-up. I had the EPA administrator up here in Fairbanks, held a public, essentially town hall with him and Senator Murkowski, and he just testified in front of the Environment and Public Works Committee, where you know, I've highlighted a whole host of Alaska-oriented issues. So let me get back to you on the answer on that. I'm probably not as up to speed on the details of that as possible. I thought his visit here was quite impactful in terms of his desire to want to help us. And so, and work with not just the borough, but the state and everybody on this. And the issue of a rejection, as you know, we got to work that in a way that balances to make sure the health and environmental outlook of our citizens, particularly in the interior, is obviously extremely important. And even at the end of the day, there's attachments to highway funding and other things that could be in jeopardy. So we're tracking it closely, but I probably need a little bit more of a update on the latest before I try to answer your question. Maybe do you have a view on it, or does anyone else on the line have a view on what we should be doing or saying with regard to EPA? And you know, it's EPA and the state, which is of course something we track closely, but I'd welcome your thoughts on it, Mike.
Well, I was just concerned about the idea of basically being stuck with 10 more years of above safe limits with respect to the PM 2.5 and the precursor gases that are involved in this. And we were hoping for something that had a little more teeth in it that would get us to a safe zone sooner than 10 years. You know, I guess at this point, you know, they're talking about a 5% reduction annually for the next 10 years, which still only adds up to 50% reduction, which still doesn't get us there. And so I guess I'm just concerned that people are going to be basically living with this for some period of time coming forward. So I'd like to see a little better plan than that.
Okay, let me and my team get back to you. Like I said, I probably need as I mentioned, you know, within the last year, we've done two big meetings dedicated solely to that issue, to educate him and to try to bring consensus in the way that I mentioned, and I think that most people want. But let me get back to you on that as the more specific issues as it relates to the teeth, as you're mentioning.
I think one of the things, Senator, that's happening on that is that information is not being disseminated freely in the community on what's being worked with between the borough and the EPA. You know, so, you know, the borough used to have a large group of Fairbanksans working on the issue. When that became kind of politicized, that kind of they backed off in that. Now, you know, try to getting that information out to residents hasn't been as good as it could have been.
Okay, and is that a borough or state or Fed issue?
You know, I would say it's a borough issue.
Okay.
Some of the discussion was about flexibility and resources too. I know there's a story in the paper today regarding a wood drying kiln that would ensure that there would be dry wood available in the community.
That was a big part of our discussion in February,
right?
If you remember.
So, but the hope that somehow more funds would materialize that would allow us to move forward on things like that in an affordable way.
Okay. Any final questions?
Let's see. Are there any final questions? Last one? Anyone? Well, all right. It looks like that's it. Well, thank you very much, Senator Sullivan.
Yeah, gentlemen, thank you. And by the way, I want to thank everybody here for all you're doing, and so many community leaders. And let's face it, it's been a really challenging time. And across a whole host of fronts, I think our state, you know, whether it's the energy sector, the tourism sector, the fisheries sector, or the healthcare sector, has been hit really hard on this pandemic. And what we've been trying to do at the federal level is to get as many resources through as many channels as possible to get us through this period. And then, importantly, start looking at federal policies that are going to help turbocharge our economic recovery. We got to maintain the health of our fellow Alaskans, fellow Americans with regard to the virus and COVID-19, but we also got to recognize that the health of our citizens also depends on a healthy economy. And it's a tough balance. A lot of it, as you guys know, is made at the state level. You know, I came in yesterday and had done my test in DC 2 days earlier, so I got off the plane and was able to show my documentation that I was negative testing. I know the state's been, you know, struggling with the proper balance in that regard, which is not an easy issue. When I talk to the governor, I keep talking about, you know, and I know they're trying to do it, data, right? There's certain people we know that this virus is really dangerous for, and it's our senior citizens, our elders, and others that it's not terribly dangerous for. So decisions that, in my view, can be made protecting those who are the most vulnerable is really important, but also, you know, opportunities to make sure that, for example, small businesses aren't destroyed. And it's not an easy balance, but you have my commitment to always listen to you guys. A lot of the ideas that you've seen changed at the federal level are literally from meetings like this. I will tell you, I was the senator every day pounding the Secretary of the Treasury to change the PPP loan criteria that you could apply for a loan based on your employment levels last summer. That was from meetings like this and for seasonal businesses, and we were able to get that done. So if you guys have ideas, and that's our state legislators as well, keep them coming to us because we'll keep pressing them.
Senator, one of the things, and you described the COVID testing process, you know, you think of that process, and then you think of what Jeff and I talked about earlier. If it's going to take 8 days to get a result, that travel restriction does not work for Fairbanks. It's just out of the question.
So is it maybe it's just so I have a better understanding? Is it 8? Like so for example, in the airport yesterday, because I had documentation that I've been tested within the last 72 hours, and I was tested in DC before, and I flew up on Friday or Thursday morning. But my understanding is the people who don't have that, they're in the airport, they get tested, and they get those test results pretty quickly. I came home to Anchorage 3 weeks ago and got tested at the airport, and they gave me the results in, I think it was 24 hours. So are the people who are being tested in the Fairbanks airport not getting the results for 8 days?
I have no idea. All I know
is what happened with your granddaughter?
Yeah, from my granddaughter. But, you know, Jeff talked about it. Hey, one other thing that I see George Rowe is here. George is with the University of Alaska. They've been working, University of Alaska Fairbanks specifically, but they've been working to do on a committee designed to do more work with the Department of Defense.
Good.
And George is an integral part of that. George, you got some comments on that, and maybe some thoughts that how the senator might help you?
Thanks very much, Jim. Good morning, Senator. So
hi, George.
We're working on a range of different thoughts in terms of intersections between research capabilities at the university and the needs of the Department of Defense across the state. And what we're trying to do is find areas that are consistent with the priorities that the Department of Defense has for their facilities and their people and their missions, and then that align with capabilities and our own networks. We have many veterans and some active duty or reservists at the university. We're trying to engage those networks. We're looking at things that are related to energy, health, including some of the suicide prevention and mitigation programs. We're looking at unmanned system operations and a range of others. And I'm very keenly interested in the defense synopsis that JOMA will be emailing out to see some of those priorities that are there. And if there's at some point when your office would be interested in hearing any highlights from our results, we'd be glad to provide those in an appropriate manner.
So, yeah, we would love that. And look, I think it's a really good point. It's a great point, actually. My view is that, so we're continuing this military buildup, right? I like to call, you guys have heard me talk about Alaska constitutes 3 pillars of America's military might. We're the cornerstone of missile defense, the radar, the fields, the missiles. We're the hub of air combat power for the Arctic and Asia Pacific, with the F-35s and the F-22s, and we are a platform for expeditionary forces that can go anywhere on a moment's notice. 1st Stryker Brigade, 425 down at J-Bear. And the other one I'm now starting to add is that we are the logistics hub for America's strategic interest in the Arctic. You may have seen in the Environment and Public Works Committee WRDA bill that we got, and I've been working on this for 5.5 years. The Corps of Engineers and the Navy have now committed to a deep water strategic port in Nome. They're going to have, I just talked to the OMB director, you know, that's a $500 million project that will be able, and again, we haven't gotten the approps yet, but we are so close. Everybody's for it now. When I got here 5.5 years ago, nobody was for it. They were against it. That will be able to handle an icebreaker, a destroyer. I was trying to get to be able to handle an aircraft carrier, and they were like, look, Senator, you're getting a little greedy here. But so why do I mention all that? Because all of this is happening, and your point, it's happening, okay? I mean, we got $1.6 billion now to prove it in terms of military construction if you look at the 200 in this latest NDAA. But your point is a great one. What do we do to leverage that into other areas that can provide a bright future for our state? And I think the ideas in this regard are limitless. So let me give you a couple of my examples. I really am hell-bent on Coast Guard polar class icebreakers, which you might remember 2 years ago, I got a provision in the NDAA to authorize 6 of those. We're building 2 right now. We need at least a couple of those home ported in Alaska. So that's great for national security, but as you know, the Coast Guard does tons of research. So that's a whole research platform that's not really military related that our universities, UAF, and others could dominate. This Ted Stevens Center, if we get it, and we're in this NDAA, we got a great first step, that will cement us as the place for America, for the world, as the Arctic Strategic Studies place. And if that happens at UAF, that's limitless. To have DOD, because remember, DOD will fund that. Our unmanned vehicle systems and testing. As I mentioned, the Arctic comms, that's happening right now. Great step in the NDAA, but that you can bootstrap commercial comms onto those low Earth orbit satellites that have all kinds of non-DOD applications. So the idea of leveraging what's happening on the military front with other areas for a strategic and bright future for our state, let us have it as much as you guys have. We're all about it. I think it's a great idea and goal, and we're already trying to do it, but we need more ideas.
You know, one of the things in the conversation with George here, as you look at building up the Arctic, you know, for a number of reasons beyond military, you know, research and whatever, the defunding of the university system in the last 5 years has really put the university in a tough position to really step up and do what it needs to do and what we need to do as we look to how to build in the Arctic, what infrastructure should look like in the Arctic. And probably if we learn nothing from the disaster that recently happened in Russia with the oil spill, and it was related to permafrost, how to do those things right.
Yeah.
We need support for that type of research, and the university is doing that type of research. So this defunding process that we're going through is really exactly at the wrong time.
Well, look, last time I was in Fairbanks in February, I sat down with the entire Board of Regents at UAF and walked them through kind of this vision, in which my view, similar to Jim's and probably yours, George, is that the university system should be a centerpiece of our way to think strategically about the Arctic, beyond just the military. And I highlighted this Ted Stevens idea that Lisa and I are working on, and now I'm glad to be able to say, coming back to Fairbanks 4 months or 3 months later, is we're not there yet, but we pretty damn good first step. So we're on it, but we would love your ideas on this as we continue to move forward. I think it's hopeful and it's happening, right? This is not pie in the sky stuff. And when the President of the United States puts out a memo from him to his cabinet saying we got to do more in the Arctic, we have to look at basing of these icebreakers somewhere in the Arctic. Like that's Alaska. Sorry, but that's going to happen. Should happen. It's a great opportunity we can leverage into so many other areas. So I'm really excited about it, and it is happening. This is not pie in the sky stuff anymore. It's like happening. So we just got to continue to make it happen.
Senator, one last question, and I know you've got to run out of here, but it popped up out of the Senate a few days ago that a group of senators are interested in placing more F-35s in the Asia-Pacific theater. Does that have any consequence to Alaska?
It could. I'm one of those senators. I'm all over there's a whole shift now. Everybody's recognized China is the geostrategic challenge for the next 50 to 100 years, and we got to be ready for it. And, we need platforms that are secure, meaning we need to be able to base things, but, look at the Philippines. It hasn't always been secure, meaning politically, you wake up, heck, even their president now is a bit of well, I probably shouldn't comment on exactly what I think about him, but Duterte you can't figure out what he wants. So what do we need? We need forces out here, but we need to have them in places that we know are going to be secure. Well, I guarantee you, one of the states in the United States is here. I was on a phone call with the Secretary of Defense recently on a topic like this. And I did say, it was a little tongue-in-cheek, but I wasn't, there's F-35s, for example, based in Burlington, Vermont. City Council of Burlington, Vermont consistently passes resolutions saying how they don't want them. They don't want them. And I told the Secretary, I'm like, Mr. Secretary, with all due respect to the fine people of Vermont, if they don't want them, I know one state that'll take them, right? So part of it, and I'll end by complimenting everybody here. Human nature is human nature. You want to be in a place where people want you, and that goes for the military as well. And we want these forces. We're a very pro-military state. We got more vets per capita than any state in the country. And I think it plays to our advantage that when the DOD is looking around the world at the Asia Pacific and other places, where's a safe, secure place that they can be in the, in the battle if they have to be, and they're wanted in that community, there's no better place than us. I mean, even relative to Hawaii. Hawaii sometimes gets sick of the Marines in other places. We don't really have that problem here. So it's a really big opportunity for us.
Thank you, Senator. Again, thank you for what you do for Alaska. It is much appreciated, and as you know, we are 100% behind you and your team. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jim. Good to see everybody. Keep up the
Thank
great
you.
work. Thanks, everybody.
Everybody
Thanks so much.
logs off.
One last word on COVID, since it was such a big part of the discussion today. Just know that Tuesday, we will be having a meeting on Tuesday. Right now on schedule are the municipal leaders to come talk about the municipal plans for the distribution of the state COVID funds that were appropriated by you. Thank you, Rep. LeBon, Rep. Prox, and the rest of the legislature. So again, just know that we will be having a meeting Tuesday, 8 a.m. the normal time, and it's going to be municipal leaders. Right now I have confirmed Mayor Ward as well as City of Fairbanks, again, to talk about their plans. They're not formalized yet. They have to go through their other representative bodies, but their plans for the distribution of those funds.
Perfect.
Okay?
Great.
All right. Have a
Thanks,
great weekend, everybody.
Have a great day. Great weekend.
Happy solstice weekend, everybody. Holiday.
Bye.
Great.